This video is brought to you by Nvidia's new GeForce RTX 50 series GPUs, delivering game-changing capabilities. Stick around to the end of the video to see how Nvidia's next-generation hardware will transform the way you play. Gamers, warning, you are entering earnings call season, where all the CEOs descend from their golden thrones to hold forth, vastly overstating their W's, sneakily burying their L's in the fine print, all while prognosticating improbable predictions for the future. God, that was hard to say. Where to begin? Well, Xbox seems as good a place as any. Lord knows they had a hell of a lot riding on this past holiday season. It was, after all, their first year-end period after they acquired Activision Blizzard King for like $100 bajillion. So, how well did it do for Team Green? Are we hitting that magic 10% year-on-year growth that the shareholders demand? In the crucial October to December quarter, the real moneymaker and the quarter in which Microsoft released a new Call of Duty game, Microsoft's gaming revenue was down 7% year-on-year. So, what happened? Well, on the content and services side, Xbox grew 2% due to Game Pass and Call of Duty performing well for them. PC Game Pass in particular did very well, growing 30% in just one quarter, which is frankly huge, and exactly what Microsoft wanted when they put stuff like Call of Duty and Indiana Jones on Game Pass. But yeah, just 2% growth in content and services. If Game Pass and COD were doing so well, why wasn't that number bigger? Well, the anemic figure can be largely attributed to the collapse of Xbox's hardware business, which saw a 29% year-on-year decline versus Q2 last year. Recall that quarter between October and December of 2023, that was the last quarter where Xbox was fully committed to an exclusives-driven strategy, where you could play games on Xbox, PC, and cloud-enabled devices, but outside of some very specific exceptions, you couldn't play them on PlayStation or Switch. In January of 2024, Xbox started its slow, messy, confused sidle into multi-platform publishing, and anyone who understands the economics of the console business immediately understood that that policy pivot would spell the end for Xbox consoles, because why would I buy an Xbox when I can buy a PlayStation and get all of their exclusives and Xbox games as well? And that's setting aside Xbox's Play Anywhere strategy, where they've gone to great lengths to convince us that we already own an Xbox. Hell, we probably have like 10 of them between our phone, our TV, our tablet, and anything else with a screen, except of course your microwave, but I'm sure LG are working on that right now. Point is, Xbox is running a marketing campaign that literally tells you you don't need to purchase an Xbox, so Microsoft can hardly act surprised when people follow that advice. None of this is to say that this is a bad strategy, mind you, since yeah, we clearly are moving to a more hardware agnostic future where you can play PlayStation exclusives on a PC and you can play Xbox game on a fucking Etch-a-Sketch, I don't know. But it's interesting to note that the Switch has just surpassed 150 million units sold, making it one of the highest selling consoles of all time, and that company certainly has no interest in letting you play the next Mario game on a PlayStation. These results make it very difficult to believe Phil Spencer when he says that he's committed to Xbox hardware being a bedrock aspect of the Xbox business. But look, I'll rephrase that. I actually do believe that's what Phil Spencer wants, because I think he's still a believer in the console business. I could be totally off base with this, but it does feel as though he's been dragged rather reluctantly towards this multi-platform future, which is why the messaging around this from Xbox was so delayed and messy and confusing for literally a year before Phil Spencer finally clarified it last week. But just because Phil Spencer wants to keep making Xbox consoles doesn't mean his boss, Satya Nadella, agrees with that approach. And when your subscription business is growing by 30% in one quarter, while your hardware business declines 30% in one quarter, it becomes pretty clear which way the wind is going to blow when it comes time for Microsoft's leadership to greenlight new hardware initiatives. For what it's worth, I do think Microsoft will continue to make hardware the same way they make Surface laptops, for example. But do I think it's going to be a core part of Xbox's business going forward? I highly doubt that, and these quarterly results are the perfect illustration as to why. So Xbox is pretty flat right now despite massive investment in content and services, but Nintendo's profit is plummeting at the moment as the Nintendo Switch hits market saturation with no major games releasing this past year. In their earnings call, Nintendo revealed that profit had dropped 46.7% year-on-year, remarking that, quote, Nintendo Switch hardware and software sales through the third quarter were below expectations, end quote. That's a pretty massive decline, but let's not forget that in 2023 we had a new Zelda game and a new Mario game. They were always going to shift some units, and anyone who hadn't already picked up a Switch, those games were a perfect excuse to do so. 2024's releases were, in comparison, nothing to write home about. I mean, Super Mario Party Jamboree, okay, but that still managed to sell 6 million units, by the way. Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom only sold through 3.9 million units, which to be honest is a really low number for anything with the word Zelda on the box. By comparison, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, the game that's been out for like 2 decades, that sold through 5.38 million units in the same period, reaching a total sell-through of 67.35 million units. Perhaps of greater concern to Nintendo is the fact that mobile revenue was down 33% year on year, but Nintendo did suggest that last year's numbers were inflated due to the strong performance of the Mario movie, giving all Mario-related titles a nice bump. But it's also a reminder that Nintendo has failed to land on a successful mobile strategy despite a large number of releases in the category, and their diminishing investment in that space indicates that Nintendo aren't looking to double down on an area that isn't working well for them. Either way, the Switch 2 really can't come soon enough for Nintendo, but no one's panicking because Nintendo has basically divorced itself from the sort of traditional expectations that govern the behavior of most listed companies. Nintendo is weird and people get that, and they're willing to wait a little longer for them to do their thing, and that is why their stock price actually went up after this announcement rather than going down. Not so for EA, whose share price took a massive tumble last week after EA announced weaker than projected holiday bookings, laying the blame squarely at the feet of EA FC, their football game, as well as Dragon Age the Veilguard missing sales targets by a massive 50%. That announcement was made last week, but this week EA executives spoke about it during an earnings call. Here's what EA CEO and Patrick Bateman cosplayer Andy Wilson had to say about Veilguard flopping, quote, "In order to break beyond the core audience, games need to directly connect to the evolving demands of players who increasingly seek shared world features and deeper engagement alongside high-quality narratives in this beloved category. Dragon Age had a high-quality launch and was well-reviewed by critics and those who played. However, it did not resonate with a broad enough audience in this highly competitive market," end quote. Alright Andy, I'm going to stop you right there. Now you are bang on when you say that we expect high-quality narratives from a Dragon Age title, and indeed even people that enjoyed Veilguard will freely admit that the writing was not great, or at the very least a significant step down versus BioWare's previous output like Mass Effect, Dragon Age Origins, and Baldur's Gate 2 all those years ago. But to suggest that Dragon Age players are seeking shared world features, what the fucking fuck are you talking about? That is half the reason that Veilguard was as weak as it was, because it started its life as a live service game which absolutely nobody wanted, so it pivoted back to a single player game that still had vestiges of the live service design left behind. If the lesson you take away from Veilguard is we should have stuck with the live service angle, then God help the Mass Effect project currently in development, and God help the remaining 100 people working at BioWare. Because yes, believe it or not, reporting from Jason Schreier at Bloomberg has confirmed that cuts to BioWare were far deeper than any of us had predicted, and what's left is basically a skeleton crew. Schreier reports that some 2 years ago there were over 200 people working at BioWare, which to be honest is less than I would have thought, but after staff being transferred to other EA studios and a number of layoffs, BioWare is the smallest it's been since its early days when they were working on Shattered Steel and Baldur's Gate 1. So the stock market is very pissed off, but don't worry, EA's got a winning strategy that is sure to transform the company and help it produce more great games that players love, and that strategy is an accelerated stock buyback program. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, to make sure all those executive stock options vest at a nice fat price point, EA is going to buy $1 billion worth of stock a year earlier than they had planned, part of their multi-year $5 billion stock buyback program. See, why invest in people and studios when you could just give money to BlackRock and Vanguard and get the same result? I exaggerate, but only slightly. The truth is, EA are still in the business of making video games, and they've begun to tease their next big flagship release, a new Battlefield game. Now, we all remember Battlefield 2042, despite our best efforts to forget it. That was a truly bad video game, at least at launch. I don't know how much better it got after that. At launch, it was horrendously buggy, appallingly light on content, and it was based on a number of baffling design decisions that were frankly antithetical to the core Battlefield experience. Stuff like specialist over classes, and an absence of destruction, and goofy cosmetics, and so many game systems removed or tweaked in ways that just didn't make sense. The game did find a small but dedicated player base after a number of patches rolled through, but it became pretty clear pretty fast that EA were looking for the door on this one ASAP so they could move on to the next thing. And this is the next thing. We've only seen a tiny smidgen of gameplay so far, but it does look pretty cool. Plenty of destruction is the main draw card, since 2042 had a depressing lack of that, and the finals really ate DICE's lunch when it came to destructibility. Hardly a surprise though, given that most of Embark Studios came from DICE. Anyway, I digress. The point is, a new Battlefield is on the way, and EA says they're determined not to make the same mistakes again, which is why they've announced Battlefield Labs, a testing program that is apparently the most ambitious in the franchise's history. industry. You can sign up for it, you need to sign an NDA if you get in, and at that point you can begin testing the next Battlefield game so that the studios working on it, which includes DICE, Criterion, Ripple Effect, and Motive, can actually, fix issues before EA charges customers for the product. An idea so crazy it just might work. I'm being cynical. The truth is, this is actually a really great move from EA. These companies are so often reluctant to properly test their games prior to release because they're scared of games losing their marketing thunder. But imagine if we get a Battlefield game in 2026 that is really, really polished. Not just technically, but also from a design perspective, full of ideas and systems that have been ideated on based on extensive player testing and feedback. It's a dream almost impossible to imagine, and I'm certainly not counting any chickens yet, but it's nice to see EA going in this direction because unlike the COD community, the Battlefield community deserve good video games. And I can make that joke here because none of you give a shit about COD. I love you guys. Pivoting back to more earnings call news now, and shock horror, Facebook's VR business is still losing the equivalent of a medium-sized nation's GDP every single year. In 2022, Meta Labs lost $13.7 billion. In 2023, they lost $16.1 billion. And in 2024, Meta Labs lost $17.1 billion. Quarter 4 revenue was just $1.1 billion and it grew by just 1%. Those are some Xbox ass numbers right there. What's craziest about this is that Meta's CFO actually said that they should expect losses to get even bigger in the future as they plan to increase investment in their AI glasses rollout. $18 billion down the drain so we can all wear Ray-Bans that can take photos and give us GPS directions. Sounds like a pretty good use of cash to me. Keep it up, guys. And finally, huge news out of Warner Brothers this week. Multiverses is getting canned. If you didn't hear about this one, that's a little surprising since it did make a fairly big splash when it arrived back in 2022 in beta form. Back then, it had 20 million players in the first month and 150,000 concurrent players on Steam. That was an absolutely mammoth debut that really gave people a lot of hope that this one might go the distance. Much of that momentum was arrested by the decision to take the game offline for a full year while progression systems were reworked, and the game was ported to Unreal Engine 5. It then launched in June of 2023 to little fanfare before being relaunched in 2024 just to see if that might do something, but it didn't, I guess, because, well, here we are. Season 5 will be the last season, at which point you'll no longer be able to download the game. Servers will stay online until May of this year, at which point they'll be turned off. You'll still be able to play the game, but only in offline mode. This is a pretty big loss for Warner Brothers, who called out the game's performance during their earnings call this week. They said of it, quote, "We took another 100 million plus impairment due to the underperforming releases, primarily Multiverses this quarter," end quote. This is, of course, after Warner Brothers took a $200 million impairment sometime last year after the failure of Suicide Squad. So much like basically every other publisher trying to chase this trend, Warner Brothers have struck out bigly in the live service gold rush. With these sorts of results, it's little surprise that Warner Brothers games boss David Haddad is stepping down after 12 years in the job. Warner Brothers says they have no plans to sell their games division despite rumors to the contrary, and they plan to fill Haddad's role soon so that their replacement can get to work on making that live service Harry Potter game that you just know they're itching to make. Will it be the first Harry Potter thing to lose money? Hell, if Disney can do it with Marvel's Avengers, then I'm sure Warner Brothers can make it happen with Harry Potter. A quick lightning round to finish off. Netflix seem to be winding back some of their gaming ambitions, or at least reorienting them towards bigger hitters. They previously announced they were going to publish 5 smaller titles to their mobile storefront, including Don't Starve Together, Tales of the Shire, and Thirsty Suitors. But now those publishing deals have been nixed and those games will no longer come to Netflix. It comes after some leadership changes at the top of Netflix's game business, so these cancellations very likely signal a shift in strategy. A Netflix representative did say the move was, quote, "part of adjusting our portfolio as we learn more about what our members like," end quote. Today I learned that Netflix call their subscribers members. That's kind of weird, right? Terrible news right here that I hope is only temporary. Roll 7's critically acclaimed bangers Ollie Ollie World and Rollerdrome have both been delisted from Steam. This is likely due to a change in publisher, with Private Division being dissolved and the rights of the game transitioning to 2K. 2K have issued a statement saying the games will return soon, so this is kind of a nothing story that I only included because it gave me the chance to remind you that Ollie Ollie World and Rollerdrome exist and that they rule and that you should absolutely play them. Hideki Kamiya's most recent comments indicate that things are likely a lot worse at his old employer, Platinum Games, than many of us had suspected. He revealed that over the last little while, the studio has lost some seriously heavy-hitting talent, including the Bayonetta Origins director, the Bayonetta 3 director, the Astral Chain director, the Metal Gear Rising director, and the list goes on. Doesn't bode well for Ninja Gaiden 4, which Platinum are co-developing with Team Ninja, but the trailer for that one did look cool, so fingers crossed they still have the talent they need to deliver Platinum's signature mix of depth and flair. Adaptation news now, and they're doing that thing again where they announce a movie for a game that's not even out yet. This this time it's for Claire Obscure Expedition 33, which admittedly looks like an awesome game, and sure, a film about that could be cool, but let's make sure the game is good first, okay? Interestingly, this one has been signed by Story Kitchen, who have like 20 licensed game projects on their plate, so expect most of them to never see the light of day. Hopefully there's one Story Kitchen project that does make it out the door, and that's the rumored Sleeping Dogs adaptation. IGN are reporting they have sources close to the matter that can confirm the adaptation exists in deal form, and that Shang-Chi actor Simu Liu is set to star and produce. Honestly, unless this one is accompanied by a newly releasing Sleeping Dogs game, I can't see the market for this one being super huge, so my big hope is that there actually is a game secretly in the works that we'll hear about soon. And speaking of a fool's hope, did you guys see that Sony DMCA struck the patch that lets you play Bloodborne at 60 FPS? So firstly, what the fuck, Sony? Imagine DMCA striking a mod that makes your game run better. Embarrassing. But secondly, there is a silver lining to this, and that's that this mod has been out since 2021, and Sony never had a problem with it before, so why would they suddenly have a problem with it now? Unless they were planning to remaster or remake Bloodborne. And not for nothing, but that is a project that would be perfect for one Bluepoint Studio who recently had a slot in their schedule open up owing to the cancellation of their live service God of War game. And Jesus Christ, I still gag every time I hear the word live service God of War game. I don't think I'll ever get over that. So what got announced or delayed this week? Well, here's a big one. Microsoft announced Forza Horizon 5 for the PlayStation 5. Look, I don't know about you, but it's been like a year since Phil Spencer started tiptoeing around the whole multi-platform thing, so this wasn't exactly the biggest surprise. We all know that all bets are off with Xbox at this point when it comes to multi-platform strategy, so if they announced Halo tomorrow, then none of you who watch this show and follow this stuff would be remotely surprised. Still, this is a nice little get for PS5 owners. The Forza Horizon series is absolutely fantastic, and it'll be nice to have another good racing game to play on the console other than Gran Turismo, because God knows EA aren't doing anything with Need for Speed right now, and all the promising looking up-and-comers are on PC for the moment. This one's going to feature crossplay between all platforms, so really everyone wins, except of course all those people who bought an Xbox on the promise of exclusive games that you couldn't play anywhere else. Some of those people are pretty mad right now, fair enough. Expect this one to drop sometime mid-year, no specific date yet. Sticking with driving games a little longer, seems like 2025 is going to be the big year for Japanese street racing games. We had Tokyo Extreme Racer completely tear it up on Steam a couple of weeks ago, and now another one is just over the horizon. Did you see what I did? Never mind. JDM Japanese Drift Master is the new racer coming out on the 26th of March for PC, and it's aiming for that middle point of simulation and arcade racing that Horizon has, but with a focus on drifting and generally trying to capture that vibe of, like, you know, Initial D. This comes from a Polish developer called Gaming Factory, who you probably haven't heard of before. However, they did release a free prologue demo for JDM last year, which ended up with a mostly positive sentiment overall after 1,800 reviews, which suggests good things. And yes, Steam does let you review demos now, so long as the developer actually wants to hear all of your thoughts about how to make their game better. Alright, forget racing, how about smashing things? We've talked about Instruments of Destruction on the show before. That's the vehicular destruction game from the tech lead on Red Faction Guerrilla, and it's kind of like the modern spiritual successor to Blast Corps on the Nintendo 64. Remember Blast Corps? Anyway, Instruments of Destruction came out in May last year to positive reviews, and now it's making its way to PS5 and Xbox Series consoles on March 27th. Okay, maybe you don't remember Blast Corps, but you sure as shit remember The Sims. Last week, EA announced and surprise released The Sims 1 and 2 Legacy Collection on Steam. That was to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the series. Now, these are not remasters, sadly, but re-releases that attempt to get them running properly on modern Windows machines. Did EA achieve that goal? Question mark? Well, reviews on Steam right now are mixed across both games, with lots of die-hard Sims heads in the reviews lamenting the fact that there are somehow more bugs than in the original releases. Modern gaming, adding bugs to games 20 years old. Somebody tell Andy Wilson to get the folks at Good Old Games on the phone to do a proper job on this one. If you're not the kind of deranged sadist that wants to trap human beings in swimming pools and wall them in with no way to escape, maybe Killing Floor 3 is more your speed. They just announced a release date of March 25th for this co-op horror FPS, which is coming to PC, PS5, and Xbox Series consoles, with a closed beta happening this month as well. Just look at this footage. So relaxing. Here's one that Ed snuck in. You guys like cowboys? You like old school adventure games? Rosewater is the next game from solo developer Francesco Gonzalez, who's been specializing in period piece adventure games for a while now, and it seems to be doing pretty well. He's been working on this one for 7 years now, and it just got a release date of 28th of March for PC. The cast features the likes of Roger Clark, who was of course Arthur from Red Dead Redemption 2, because if you're gonna make a cowboy game, why not get Videogames' most famous cowboy to voice it? And finally, Xbox announced announced that they would be making more announcements later this month by setting a date for the next ID at Xbox Showcase, which is happening on February 24th. They say it'll feature new trailers and reveals from indie publishers like Raw Fury, Don't Nod, 11-Bit Studios, PlayStack, Team 17, and Devolver's new licensed games arm. Big fan. Expect a new Balatro collab announcement. How about some Power World cars? Really stick it to Nintendo. Alright, let's take a look at what came out last week. Well, Marvel's Spider-Man 2 came swinging out the gates on Steam and immediately proceeded to go splat into the side of a building and then clip through that building and then the whole world. At least that's what people are saying in the Steam reviews, which currently sit at a mixed rating with 5,500 reviews counted. There's a slew of talk about bugs, stability issues, problems with ray tracing and hard crashes. Bit of a surprising result considering Nixxes was handling this one, and they've got a really good track record historically. There have already been 2 hotfixes released so far, so if you're thinking of picking this one up on PC, it might be worth waiting until the storm passes. Hey, at least that PSN account thing is optional now, that's good. Since we're staying away from Spidey for the moment, I guess we'll do some Sniper Elite stuff. Sniper Elite Resistance came out last week for PC, PS5, and Xbox consoles, and although Austin wasn't too hot on this one when he previewed it, it seems to have landed pretty well with a fan 74 on OpenCritic. The majority of the reviews are basically along the lines of, yeah, this is still kind of the same thing it always was, but it's still fun. PC Gamer scored at 74 and summed it up this way, quote, "It's old-fashioned, but I find it quite compelling that it's a game that knows exactly what it wants to be," end quote. Meanwhile, Eurogamer seemed a little more enamored of it, giving it 4 out of 5 stars, saying, quote, "Your mileage admittedly may vary if you're a Sniper Elite veteran itching for something new. For better or worse, this isn't that much of a departure from Sniper Elite 5, but as I said, I just got a medal for blasting a Nazi's testicle off from 326 meters away," end quote. Hard to argue with that. Phantom Brave: The Lost Hero is an anime tactical RPG that's the sequel to the one released on the PS2 20 years ago, and as it turns out, it's still got some chops. This one has landed at a strong 80 on OpenCritic with some positive reviews that make note of its satisfying complexity. Here's Pure Nintendo, who gave it 8 out of 10, quote, "Phantom Brave: The Lost Hero is likely to overwhelm even the most experienced SRPG aficionados at the start, but that's by design. Its depth and uniqueness will delight those choosing to stick with it," end quote. Moving on to Ed's big "I told you bro" moment, Hello Kitty Island Adventure has landed at a strong 78 on OpenCritic, though there is a bigger disparity between the reviews, with some of the digs coming out of the fact that this was originally designed as a mobile game. Here's Jewel Shockers, who gave it a modest 7.5 out of 10, quote, "The game's childish appearance hides plenty of depth, including an engaging world and story that makes you want to reach the bottom of it without stressing out about leveling up or grinding unlocks instead of focusing on the game itself," end quote. Moving on to some of the bigger ones from this week, narrative RPG Citizen Sleeper 2 is absolutely killing it, a mighty 86 on OpenCritic, with plenty of the reviews applauding the strength of its slow burn narrative and hard choices, even if a few of the critics didn't quite vibe with the sequel's expanded scope. Here's Eurogamer, who scored it 5 out of 5 stars, quote, "Citizen Sleeper 2 isn't afraid to let you fail. A whole new suite of mechanics is designed to pile the pressure on you and put you in uncomfortable situations, and knowing you can fail does a tremendously powerful thing. It grips you, pulls you forward, and makes you pay close attention to what you're doing. It pulls you deeper into the sci-fi world, and in Citizen Sleeper 2, it's as though a whole new side of the game has emerged, coming forward to energize the tender-hearted formula of the original. Under tension, the series is transformed," end quote. Tech Radar was also thoroughly moved and also went in with 5 out of 5 stars. Here's what they had to say, quote, "It's achieved the rare feat of balancing its narrative with a multifaceted system without drowning its humanity in these details, all the while imparting the value of collective action and mutual aid. For a tale set in a cyber dystopia, it's an uncharacteristically hopeful tale," end quote. From the far-flung future to the distant past, let's go back in time now and check out the medieval open-world RPG Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, and yep, this is a good one. This one's also hit a mighty on OpenCritic with an average of 89 at the time of writing. Here's IGN, who scored it a 9 out of 10, quote, "In many ways, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 feels like it's picked up and run with the reactive first-person RPG torch that Bethesda left laying in the mud years ago in pursuit of a broader audience. Sometimes it's not sure if it wants to be a cinematic tale about a specific guy going on a specific adventure, or a truly dynamic open-world sandbox packed with interesting and varied side quests. And that could lead to a few immersion-shattering conflicts, but most of the time, leaning into one doesn't get in the way of the other, and you're free to go on any of its many optional adventures along the way to a thought-provoking and rousing finale for the main plot. I was delighted to get lost in this world, and it will be a long time before I forget its exceptional story," end quote. If you're wondering where my review for this one is, it's a work in progress. This game is actually around 90 hours to complete, and while I'm getting near the end of it, I simply needed more time to finish it, and then write the review and all that other stuff. Truth is, I love it to the degree where I don't want to rush it. So let that be my mini review for now, and I'll have the full one up just as soon as I'm able. So if you'd like to know the minute that's live, be sure to subscribe and ding the notification bell, or hit the follow button on Spotify, because yes, you can now watch skill up videos on Spotify. Enjoy. If you're the kind of person who'd rather make history rather than follow along with it, then Civilization 7 might be for you. The latest blockbuster strategy game from Firaxis has come in at a strong rating on OpenCritic with an average score of 82 at the time of writing. Now, Civ games are notorious for being just kind of okay at launch and evolving into something dramatically better as the years go on and expansions turn things upside down, or things can go completely the other way as Civ fanatics slowly discover the limitations of certain systems after 200 hours. So definitely treat these initial reviews as like early impressions in the grand scheme of things. Still, they're positive. Here's Paste, whose veteran Civ player reviewer absolutely loved it and scored it 9.7 out of 10. Quote, "I managed 3 full games of Civ during the rather generous review window, and for the first time in decades of playing Civ, and as a genuine rarity as a game reviewer, I simply wanted to go back for more. With Civilization 7, Firaxis' developers have not only made a gorgeous, beautifully scored game about historical weirdos, they've made one that truly feels accessible and invigorating for the franchise and genre. Longtime fans may be disheartened by the breaking of the rule of thirds, referring to the New Ages system, but sometimes rules need to be broken for Civilization to advance," end quote. Here's another review from Press Start, who got a relative Civ newbie to review it, and they ended up giving it an 8 out of 10, and they were a little bit more cautious, but still positive. Quote, "While some systemic choices hampered my role-playing goals more than I'd like, they've undeniably turned Civilization into a far more approachable and digestible game. Much like my time with 6 before it, I found it remarkably easy to slip into a comfort zone with 7, each turn a new opportunity to explore or system to gently poke at with curiosity and caution. In streamlining itself for a new age, Civilization 7 is as welcome an experience as a new player could ask for, though its incentives for deeper extendable play are somewhat hampered by its eager attempts to make everything as smooth as possible," end quote. I actually played this one myself, by the way, 23 hours in a single weekend. That was not healthy. TLDR, I like it, but thematically, it's kind of weird in its treatment of history as like a polyglot toy box rather than a contiguous tapestry, and that kind of hampered my immersion a little more than I would have liked. That's honestly a really hard point to make in a tiny review roundup blurb though, so if you'd like to see my full thoughts about it, you can check out the most recent episode of the Friends Per Second podcast. I'll leave a link to that below the like button. And wrapping up the week that was now with Rift of the Necrodancer, which reimagines the rhythm roguelike into something a bit more traditional, and it's landed very well at a strong 83 on OpenCritic. Here's IGN, who gave it an 8 out of 10, saying, quote, "I could wear out my keyboard slapping arrow keys to the beat and jamming in my seat to Rift of the Necrodancer's excellent soundtrack, fervently chasing down a perfect run of a song for hours. Whether I was fighting stuffy puppet masters rhythmically riding the world of monsters, or just waddling around in a silly mole costume, it provides many excellent flavors of arcade-style rhythm action. Even though this greatest hits anthology isn't as focused or earth-shattering as Brace Yourself Games' genre-bending debut album, it still continually surprised and delighted me by providing clever twists on time-tested mechanics," end quote. Alright, so what's coming out this week? Well, first up is Keep Driving, which comes out on Thursday, February 6th for PC. This is the management roguelite RPG about road tripping in your early 20s, where you battle traffic hazards, pick up hitchhikers for your party, listen to indie rock mix CDs, and let the roads guide you towards various side quests. We featured this one and I put this on your radar last week. Ed's played like a dozen hours of it since, and it comes recommended as a chill-out game with heavy 2000s vibes. Up next is something very Austin-coded. It's an isometric action roguelike that's basically Hades, but with King Arthur. It's called Sworn. This one's being published by Team 17, who usually have a pretty good eye, and it's also got 4-player co-op. Worth noting, this is an early access release though, so be sure to check those reviews to see whether or not it's worth jumping in day one. Also out on February 6th, and this is its actual title, a game about digging a hole, which looks exactly what it sounds like. Absolutely shouting at the description for this one that reads, quote, "It's not The Witcher 4, but I hope you'll hit the wish list button anyway," end quote. Damn, that must have been a very calculated marketing strategy, because this is actually one of the most wishlisted games on Steam right now. Definitely expect to see a stupid amount of Twitch streamers pick this one up. And I, for one, am looking forward to the Steam reviews for this one. They always deliver on a game like this. Jumping over to next week, on February 11th, Civilization 7 will release for all platforms for anyone who wasn't bold enough to purchase the really expensive editions of the game for early access. We've talked enough about that one already. On February 12th, we've got a Japanese indie game by the name of Urban Myth Dissolution Center coming out on PC, Switch, and PS5. This is a very intriguing looking visual novel with some striking pixel art revolving around a detective agency that investigates paranormal activities around the city. It's definitely got a vibe and a particular audience in mind. We'll look forward to seeing how people respond to this one. Finally, a quick shout out to Alien Rogue Incursion, which comes out on Quest on the 13th. This is a VR Aliens game that came out last year for PC and PS5, and it was pretty good, unless you were like a die-hard VR fan, in which case you gotta take what you can get, because it's not like they're making too many VR games these days. As they say, beggars can't be choosers. Valentine's Day next week is the big one for releases, so we'll check back in on next week's show. But while we're all patiently waiting for more of February's big games to trickle out, why not put this on your radar? This is While Waiting, and it's a game about waiting. This one was featured on Day of the Devs during the last Summer Games Fest, and it's a comedy game where you follow a kid from birth to death and sit with him through various slice-of-life puzzle scenes. The goal is to learn to sit and wait through each one and try to resist clicking on all of the tempting interactions, which will inevitably fuck things up for him, but would also be super funny. There's a bunch of Hitman-style challenges for each one, as well as a greater moral to the whole endeavor once you get to the end, probably. While Waiting should be out on PC and Switch by the time you watch this video, and if you want to check it out, we've left a link to it over on our Steam Curator page, which also has links to all of the other put this on your radar stuff we've recently covered. I'll leave a link to all of that below the like button. Sort of free stuff time now, and over on the Epic Games Store you can still pick up the emotional survival crafting game Undying, where you have to teach your son how to survive the zombie apocalypse after you're dead. If that's too intense for you, you might enjoy this next one, Beyond Blue. It's essentially an underwater ocean exploration game with a narrative and a pretty good chilled out licensed soundtrack. Very positive reviews for this one on Steam, so be sure to grab it before it disappears on February 14th. Over on PS Plus, they've announced 3 essential games for February, which include Payday 3. Cyber's clearly trying to pump the playbase for this one since no one has left Payday 2, as well as comedic FPS High on Life, and the winner for the best worst name of a remaster, Pac-Man World Repack. PlayStation also gave us a heads up last week that they're going to stop making PS4 games a quote key benefit of PS Plus moving forward beginning January next year, either because people are finally starting to move away from last gen consoles, or because Sony is like, please God, move away from last gen consoles. We don't know which one, but I'm gonna guess the latter. Been a long show this week, so we've got to keep our feel-good story for the week fast, and there's nothing that'll bring a smile faster than seeing Nintendo's lawyers lose when they bring bullshit lawsuits. A small independent supermarket in Costa Rica had been operating for 50 years under the name Super Mario, because it was a supermarket run by a guy named Mario. So it was perfect, and everything was fine until Mario wanted to officially legally register the name of his supermarket. Well, you can imagine what happened. Nintendo dispatched a host of lawyers so large that they blotted out the sun, but it was all for naught when a judge ruled that Mario could legally register the name owing to the fact that Nintendo's trademark doesn't cover the supply of basic food products. So, look forward to Nintendo's next product release, Mario's Mushrooms. They require a prescription in 32 US states, but if you say Luigi sent you, they'll sell you that shit no questions asked. Alright ladies and gents, we are done, so get the hell out of here, but before you do, be sure to like, subscribe, and ding that notification bell. Maybe even follow us over on Spotify if you like. You've been a great audience and we appreciate you, just like we appreciate this week's sponsor, Nvidia. This week sees the release of the Nvidia GeForce RTX 50 series GPUs. It's the next leap forward in graphical technology, delivering higher frame rates, better image quality, faster input latency, and powerful enhancements for content creator workflows. The flagship offering is the RTX 5090, which is in itself an engineering marvel. This thing is roughly half the size of the 4090, and thanks to its double flow-through cooler, it's delivering some remarkable thermals. That means that even under load, the card remains cool, and the slim form factor means you can easily put this thing into an ITX or even mini ITX build. The biggest selling point though is the raw power that the 50 series delivers. On the 5090, for example, before you turn on any frame generation technology, it delivers a roughly 30% increase in frame rates over what the 4090 was delivering. Those numbers come from independent outlets like Digital Foundry, so if you want the most natively rendered frames for your games, then the 50 series delivers. But of course, Nvidia utilized their AI tensor cores and proprietary graphics technology to push performance even further. The 50 series generation sees the introduction of DLSS 4 with multi-frame generation, and this is actually a huge deal for both frame rates and image quality. On the frame rate front, multi-frame generation can add up to 3 additional frames per rendered frame. That sort of tech is perfect for offline single-player games like Alan Wake 2 or Cyberpunk, where that added smoothness can make a game look incredible, fully utilizing the capabilities of high refresh rate TVs and monitors. DLSS 4 also delivers enhanced image quality. DLSS is a technology that is essentially reconstructing an image utilizing AI models, and this latest iteration of it delivers enhancements to super resolution, deep learning anti-aliasing, and ray reconstruction. Games that utilize DLSS to hit desired frame rates, which to be honest is kind of most of them these days, they will look better when powered by DLSS 4, and on day 0, over 75 games will support DLSS 4, with many more to follow soon. There's also improvements to Nvidia Reflex, which is a technology that reduces input latency by 50%, but with the soon-to-be released Reflex Frame Warp, that will be reduced by a further 50%, meaning your games will feel super responsive, giving you an edge in online competitive games in particular. There's also improvements for content creators with the Nvidia Studio platform of RTX and AI accelerated advancements. Like, did you know that a video that took 40 minutes to render on an RTX 3090 takes just 10 minutes to render on a 5090. Nvidia is also offering tools like Nvidia Broadcast, an app that turns any room into a home studio with effects like Studio Voice to give your mic a more professional sound, and Virtual Keylight, which highlights your face for a more professional looking stream or voice call. And this is just the start of this generation, when Nvidia have proven time and time again that their new launches are just the beginning of a new wave of technologies that improve the way that game makers make games and game players play them. If you want to learn more about Nvidia's 50 series lineup, I'll leave a link to the product page below. Thanks Nvidia for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.